Yeah, I think, well, you're more like to catch my eye.
Order. Justin Madders to move the motion.
Thank you, Mrs Harris. Pranam Dar, it's a pleasure to see you in the chair this afternoon, and I beg to move that this House has considered digital exclusion. It's abundantly clear that we are living in an increasingly digital world where technology has become essential to the way we socialise, work, shop, learn, manage finances and gain access to vital services. Digital skills, connectivity and equipment are all now essential to enabling an individual to fully participate in modern society. For the majority of the population, this has made life easier. Tasks that would have been required to someone to leave the comfort of their own house in the past are now performed at the tap of a screen or the click of a button. Information that might once have required significant research can be recovered instantaneously. And while for the most part these trends do not pose any problems to people, for the minority who may lack the digital access skills or confidence to gain access to these services, it can make the world more and more inaccessible to them, and I'll happily give way.
I thank the Honourable Member for giving way. Many of my constituents can't work the system, don't know how to, or they give up. That means they miss out on vital NHS appointments and so on. Does the Honourable Member agree with me that a backup, offline, a real voice at the end of a line system would be a good idea?
Thank the Honourable Member for his intervention. I absolutely do agree with that. I will be saying no more than that due to the number of people who want to speak. I will. Yeah.
Congratulate him on his debate, which clearly has touched a nerve given the number of people here. I think digital exclusion is often about rationing. Came across this with the legal aid cuts, where a lot of services are online and therefore not accessed by people. It's now happening with GP services. And there are 2 million people in North West London who from April may have to go through a GP hub in order to access where they're going. And already we have practices deciding you've got to send an online form, we've got to send photographs before you can even get access to your GP. Doesn't it just exclude so many people from those basic services?
Thank my honourable friend for his intervention. He's absolutely right. Age UK conducted a survey in 2022 in relation to the trends in digital technology for those over 65. They actually found in total there are about 2.7 million people over the age of 65 who do not use the internet, which is about 1/5 of the population group. Similar results also found that over 40% of the over 75s were unable to turn on their device and successfully log in, and 47% were unable to find and open programmes, and those are for people who actually had internet access. So I think this is an aspect of the issue that is sometimes overlooked. Someone who has grown up in the world of computers, using them seems second nature, but actually to a number of people it is something that they just cannot deal with. I'll give way to the Honourable Member there.
To the very honourable gentleman from Ellesmere Port on his... he's really touched what a lot of people feel in their daily lives, digital exclusion. And so much of life today talks about inclusion. Isn't it time that government and business looked for strategies to include digital inclusion for the wider public? Because we know from our postbags and everything else that people have a real difficulty with this. And again, I congratulate the honourable gentleman for taking this forward, because it's something that touches so many.
I thank the Honourable Member for his intervention. I'll be coming on at the end of my speech to some questions and challenges to government. I think the fact that we've got so many members here suggests actually there are many things that we are dealing with as members of Parliament that actually are as a result of digital exclusion. I'll give away to the Honourable lady over there.
And I can give a very live example of digital exclusion in my constituency. The local council are going to introduce a charge on emptying garden bins as from 1st of April. And currently they have a special offer on, an early bird offer, where rather than paying £37, it's £20. But that's only available to residents who pay online. So it's not only excluding people, it's actually impacting them financially as well. So will he join with me in condemning Roxburgh Council on this policy that's blatantly causing digital exclusion?
Thank the Honourable lady for intervention. I would suggest that she talks to the leadership of the Council and sees whether there is some kind of accommodation that can be reached there. Clearly that services should be available at the same price to everyone regardless of their digital access. I won't take any more interventions now, Mrs Harris, because I realise there are a number of people who wish to speak. But I'll talk briefly about the banking sector. That's one area that's seen many branches closing across the country, including my own constituency, Ellesmere Port and Neston. Neston has no banks anymore. Ellesmere Port has lost a number. The nearest options offline for those customers of those banks are often a significant journey away, which we've public transport the way it is not always easy. Banks expect customers now to switch to online provisions, but that is just not possible for some people. And even if they can do this, there actually is some increased hesitation because of the concerns about online fraud. Being able to readily access banking facilities should be a basic tenet of our society, and at the moment it's too difficult for too many people. Car parking is another area that increasingly moved online. App-based payment systems are becoming commonplace, but those without smartphones can find this difficult. Even when they have a smartphone, they may lack the know-how or the mobile data to download the app, meaning they can sometimes struggle to pay for car parking. Keith, a constituent of mine, said, "My problem is with car parking, everything is done through the phone, and if you have an old phone, it's a problem downloading an app while standing in the rain with an impatient queue behind you." He's no doubt not alone. This is mainly a problem with private parking outfits, and to be fair, my local authority does offer the alternative of paying cash for the machines, but sometimes they don't always work. And in relation to local authorities, AGK have highlighted the difficulties in making applications for blue badges, housing support and council tax reductions. In London, AGK used a combination of FOIs and mystery shopping to see just how offline services were provided. They found that 17% of those responding did not offer any of these services offline. 1/4 did not offer online access to blue badge applicants, and almost 1/3 did not offer council tax reduction services offline. And they also found that half of those claiming to offer these services offline were unable to point the mystery shopper to the information that would enable them to access these services. There were problems with wait times in phone queues, as well as call handlers not actually being aware of the offline offer for services. But I want to be clear, this shouldn't be misconstrued as an attack on local authorities. I know the level of cuts they've had to face since 2010, and I am delighted that my own local authority, Cheshire West and Chester, have introduced a callback service which is available for those who are unable to complete online forms, and it directs people to a number to secure assistance. I think this is an example of the best practice that should be spread across the whole country. Now, before I wind up, Mrs Harris, I just want to touch on the impact of what this can mean for people. AGK have noted that this trend does have a profound impact on older people. It causes many more people to feel lonely, frustrated and left with the feeling of being overlooked. These feelings are completely understandable. It's about time society realised that not everyone walks around with a smartphone. Not everyone has the confidence to be able to use one either. It's all well and good saying people can use their rights under the equality laws to ensure they're not denied access, but even that is dominated by online processes, and I would suggest that actually most services do have an offline option. It is just that it can be extremely difficult to access it. So we've heard many organisations offering these services do not tell people they exist, or it will entail being in reality actually taking someone to a computer and having someone take them through that system. So I think that actually isn't really offering an offline service, it's just pointing people to a computer. So I wonder if the Minister, when responding, will advise if they've given any consideration to providing local authorities with some support, practically and financially, to promote best practice and ensure people are able to access services offline. Charities, businesses and interest groups have long been calling for there to be an updated digital inclusion strategy. The last one is rapidly approaching its 10th birthday and was due for an update in 2020. These calls were also heard resoundingly by the House of Lords Digital Committee, who said last year that the government has taken its eye off the ball and they had no confidence that this remained a priority. In defence of the government, they claimed there was no need for a new strategy and that the principles remain relevant. I would disagree with that. It's plainly clear that the digital landscape has altered massively in the last decade since the strategy was first written. Putting to one side the rapid changes in technology, the strategy has no mention at all of affordability, which I think is still a huge issue, and it cannot have considered the rapid shift that we have seen to online services. Does the government now accept that a new strategy needs to be created? Can the Minister update the House on whether they are actually considering doing one? Will the government also reconsider its approach to providing training? I note they do offer the essential digital skills qualification to provide people free of charge some training, but organisations such as the Good Things Foundation believe that these courses are too big a step and are not meeting the needs of those who are digitally excluded. Many people are not interested in gaining formal qualifications, they just want to be able to undertake basic functions and access services in a community setting. I'll give way one more time.
Honourable Gentleman for giving way again. It's not just those who are digitally excluded, but there are various levels of digital exclusion. I mean, the other week I was in touch with my mobile phone company. I certainly felt digitally excluded from EE getting through all their gates. And it's not just, as I say, those who are we assume are all digitally excluded in all areas. Some of us are actually digitally excluded in some areas, given the levels of sophistication that's now coming in. As he's saying, things have changed so much over the last number of years.
I'm grateful for his intervention. I think there is a point that the Honourable Member for Hammersmith also made, that sometimes organisations will use this as a way of actually rationing access. And
yes.
I mean, anyone who's tried to cancel a contract will know actually that it's very, very difficult and they have to go through a series of gateways. But I will conclude, Mrs Harris, because I know many other members want to speak. I do not want to stand in the way of progress, but we must be careful not to leave people behind. We need cast-iron enforceable commitments that all services, whether public or private, can be accessed in person, because there will always be people who, for whatever reason, will not be able to access services online, and there will always be situations where individual circumstances need to be explained in person. And this right needs not just to exist on a piece of paper, it needs to be exercisable in reality. Signposting to in-person options should be clear and easy to use. This is not something that should be squirreled away just to fulfil a duty that isn't actually accessible in practice. We would not tolerate people being denied access to services on any other basis, so we should not tolerate it in this basis either. And on that I will finish.
As we can see, this debate is very oversubscribed, and therefore there will be a 2-minute time limit. Can I remind colleagues, if they're wishing to speak, they need to bob. And can I also remind colleagues that interventions taken cause other colleagues to lose time further on in the debate. Sarah Dines.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. And can I congratulate the Minister for securing this important debate. Digital exclusion is a social, economic and increasingly political issue. I came into politics to preserve what we should all be doing in this place, the freedom of the individual. And sadly, we're at the position where these rights are being diminished day on day. I'm not a Luddite. I'm not against the technological age. I welcome it. But what we must do with every advance is make sure that the rights of the individual and the freedoms of the individual are advanced at a similar pace. Derbyshire Downs, where I live, is particularly affected by this because of the geography. And whilst we have had a lot of money from the government, the government has actually upheld its promises in a large regard. However, we still have patches of poor connectivity. And if I could just remind everybody, you will have read 2021, the Lloyds Bank said that as many as 10 million people don't have the basic foundation skills to be able to access the digital world. That's 1 in 6. So putting aside other things that might disadvantage them, such as not having a smartphone, or as in Derbyshire Dales, not having technology that can actually work in the Dales, that the difficulty with signals. Putting that aside, that is a huge number of people. So digital exclusion actually erodes disproportionately the rights of our elderly and disadvantaged and our the basic tenets of society like small businesses and the like. I've seen that very quickly in Derbyshire Dales. I've seen that with my experience with a campaign against the National Westminster Bank, who their managing director, because the chief executive wasn't available to see me over months, the managing director told me that he was committed to help people transition. He said, we have 60% of the people in your area connected online to our online app. I said, I'm talking about the 40%. That's what I'm concerned about. And thank you very much. I'm very pleased that I could raise these issues because we have to protect the rights of the individual. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs Harris. It's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship, and I congratulate the Honourable Member for Ellesmere Port and Neston on securing this debate. As we've heard today, the modern world is digital. We need digital technology to study, to access banks, make health appointments, to use local services and government resources. However, in rural areas such as Somerton and Frome, access to the digital space is limited by poor broadband and mobile connectivity. Rural areas such as Somerset have an ageing population that is more reliant on diminishing in-person services. Somerton and Frome has an average age of 54 compared to the national age of 40. In Somerton and Frome, only around 40% of houses have access to full fibre broadband, and 75% of my constituency is a partial 5G not spot. I often hear from constituents telling me that they feel disenfranchised from the modern world, and due to their poor poor broadband and mobile connectivity. A constituent in Sticklinch told me recently that they only have 6 megabytes per second download speed from their broadband. For comparison, the shared rural network, which aims to roll out 4G to 95% of the country, estimates that the average download speed in rural areas when using mobile data will be 7 megabytes per second. My constituents told me that they want to be dragged into the 21st century and not left isolated from modern communications. Now, while we've seen some improvements in this area, we need to go further and faster. A recent report from the National Audit Office into the shared rural network stated that the rollout is behind where it is meant to be. And I know my constituents are frustrated that they will be let down and left behind yet again. Rural areas have watched the modern world move online. They have been instructed to join in, but far too often have little left without the tools they need in order to participate. They feel excluded, they are let down, they are on the wrong side of the digital divide.
Thank you for your chairmanship, and I congratulate the honourable gentleman on securing this debate. In terms of digital exclusion, I think it really matters that we do try to have digital by default. It's a modern way of doing business. But the key thing, which I think is the request of many constituents who email me, is that in particular government services will always have an offline option, and that we continue to try and make sure that we roll out the broadband in as many ways as possible, whether that's on a mobile phone or whether that is indeed for broadband. Now, in terms of the shared rural network, there is good progress in that regard, but I would encourage the Minister to publish a map, not only of where there have been these masts placed, but also where there will be masts in the future, and to make it as easy as possible in order to get that planning permission or whatever consent is needed. In terms of some of the aspects, I have to confess, I set up an email address for my mother, and I do not do anything on behalf of my mother because I do not have the legal powers to do so. But that's the way that I currently facilitate somebody who is not used to using a computer in being able to access the services that they can. We cannot rely on simply other members of family doing that all the time, but it's important that it does not become a barrier to getting absolutely help that is needed by people, often in an emergency, that they end up not being able to get that help. I would also simply say and give some credit that during the time of the COVID pandemic, when in DWP, we kept job centres open right around the country, and that was done deliberately because we knew that not everybody would have access to digital. We know that online is not the only way you can do that. I commend the work coaches that came in and helped the most vulnerable. But I say to the Minister, this really matters to our constituents. I know that he cares, and I'm sure he will share that today.
Yeah, yeah.
Ian Byrne.
Thank you, Chair. It's an honour to serve under your chairship, and thank you, my good friend, the member for Ellesmere Port and Neston, for securing this important debate. Chair, members in this House, charities and trade unions have been warning for years that increasingly essential digital services are becoming out of reach for many. According to a survey for Citizens' Advice, 1 million people disconnected their broadband in the last year because they couldn't afford it, and people on universal credit were more than 6 times as likely to remain disconnected. Age UK also told me 6 million people aged 65 plus are either unable to use the internet safely or successfully or not online at all. Thatcher's ambition for no such thing as society is unfolding before our very eyes through digital exclusion. Isolating and disengaging huge swathes of the public is not how you build a fair and equitable and equal society. I have no doubt that one of the drivers of digital exclusion has been the 14 years of brutal austerity imposed by this government. Chair, the situation cannot continue. All public services, including the NHS and council services, must offer and promote an affordable, easy-to-access offline way of using them, and the government must provide local authorities and public services the funding to do this. Banks, including Lloyds, Barclays, HSBC, have made record profits last year. They must ensure face-to-face banking for many constituents, avoid leaving communities to become banking deserts. There's no excuse to continue closure of branches with such profits being made. As we have heard so far in this debate, broadband is an essential utility. I was extremely proud to stand on a manifesto in 2019 that recognised this. It could and should be made free and available to every home in this country as a universal public service, if only the government had the political will to do so, and I hope the Minister takes note.
Sexby.
Thank you, Mrs. Harris. As As a Member of Parliament for a very remote rural constituency, our broadband rollout was definitely behind the curve when I was elected, and I'm delighted that in my time in this place we've seen dramatic improvements in North Devon, but it has left our digital skills behind that curve. Indeed, I'm home to the train station with the highest face-to-face usage in the country, and delighted to have seen our ticket office staying open. But this digital division, I was also approached at my constituency surgery on Friday and told it was unacceptable that a government agency did not have an app on their phone, that really there was not enough digital availability. And it is this need to actually bring people along with us on these digital changes so that people are part of this and are not excluded from these different societies. We are looking, I chair the all-party parliamentary group for the broadband and digital communications, within which we are looking to put forward a campaign to explain, as we did with digital TV switchover, some of the changes that are coming within this digital landscape. And
Honourable Lady Give way. Just on that point, perhaps when the Minister sums up, could he particularly address the plans for BT on this analogue switchover to fibre lines for phone signal, which is going to cause huge problems in constituencies such as mine in North Norfolk that still have power cuts and a poor mobile signal?
Thank you, and I agree entirely with my honourable friend. This is a huge concern for rural constituencies who do lose power at the time that they need their landline the most. But as we move forward, there is the need for some education, and I very much hope that people will take up the offers at the public library. My Age Concern also did a report which looked at digital availability for the over 70s and found that those people who went to the library were far more able to get online. I'd like to take the opportunity to thank Lloyds Bank, who are bringing their actual online training to Barnstable Library. Anyone who'd like to join, please contact my office. And to really encourage, my grandmother in her mid-70s went on a digital training course at the bingo hall. There is training out there. I know it's difficult. My parents are digitally unavailable at this time. But I would encourage anyone who doesn't get the opportunity this afternoon to say everything they did to come and join the all-party parliamentary group. We are putting together a digital manifesto, which we will be putting into all parties ahead of the election. And I thank the honourable member for Ellesmere Port for securing this important debate.
Richard Ford.
Thank you, Mrs Harris, and it's a pleasure to serve with you in the chair. I think on the subject of digital exclusion, we look at the opposite also, thinking about digital literacy. And what I'm really struck by when I go home of a Thursday or a Friday is just how very digitally literate the next generation are, my children and their peer group. They are way in advance of anything that I can do online or with computers. And so I make that point because we tend to think about it being older people who are excluded when we think about digital exclusion. And yes, they absolutely are. But we need to think about lots of other people too who are also less digitally literate. And what we've seen in recent years is in company boardrooms, there has been a rush. You could even say there has been a stampede towards moving services online at the expense of doing things in person. And this is really to the detriment of a lot of older people, particularly people in rural and coastal communities like the ones that I represent. I just wanted to highlight one specific example and give voice to one constituent of mine who wrote in. Brian, who lives in Weston, a small coastal hamlet tucked away on the beautiful East Devon coastline, wrote to me to explain how he lives somewhere where there's such a poor 4G mobile phone signal and internet access that he is completely and utterly dependent on a landline. So comments made already about that losing copper is really going to have a profound effect on some people in our rural constituencies. And finally, another constituent of mine who lives in the village of Luppet has no mobile signal and is somebody who doesn't have fibre broadband connection and is concerned that when the landlines are phased out, he, quote, wants us then to think of all those who are unaware, infirm or technically naive. Will we simply be cast adrift and forgotten?
Derek Thomas.
Grateful for the opportunity to speak in this debate. Many will remember that I secured a debate on loneliness, isolation and the digital and financial inclusion back in December. And there's some things to mention, but I just wanted to very briefly pick up on some of the topics that were raised then. The digital phone switchover that is supposed to be completed next year. What assurance can the Minister, as we've already asked, give that communication will be possible in a power outage, particularly in rural, very isolated areas? DVLA, since our debate, the government have confirmed that DVA licences will continue to be renewed in the Post Office. What further services can the government put into government services? Can the government return and put into the Post Office to give that inclusion that we're arguing for today? And finally, what can the Minister say in relation to the cross-departmental interministerial work that is carrying on, the Minister spoke about in the last debate? How is that working and bringing all those ministers together to make sure that loneliness, isolation and exclusion are a thing of the past and can be addressed? Thank you.
Jim Shannon.
Can I congratulate the Honourable Gentleman for Ellesmere Port for bringing this forward? Whether this is a generational issue or not, we can't hide from the fact that there are people unable to use the internet in which ways they are needed to engage fully in modern society. 3 quick points: accessibility and affordability. On the access aspect, mainly in terms of sufficient broadband, which is a requirement for people to be digital. I have at least 3 cases ongoing in my office where broadband provision is the issue. Just to give a quick example, my constituent runs a business from the address that he cannot get sufficient broadband in the area, and ultimately means he can't take card payments, issue receipts or invoices and place online orders. So digital exclusion in terms of his business could be the ruin of him. Secondly, in relation to specifically, Minister, online electoral registration has become increasingly online in the last couple of years. Northern Ireland office is doing it all. The office is doing it, and they're offering a digital registration online for a number for online applications. Many of the times of registering, we're unaware this was something that should have been noted or required. So, what's happening, Minister, is this: people are being disenfranchised because they can't do it digitally. Maybe the Minister will come back on that one. And thirdly, the issue for elderly people who have been forced to carry out online banking by the persistent closures, not only in villages. They don't find it easy, no access to broadband, no smartphone, no community hubs available. They're becoming financially excluded through no fault of their own. So, Madam Chair, very quickly, and I've done this at record time with my voice. I think I got a 10-minute speech in the 2. In particular, our elderly generation who perhaps don't have the necessary support system to help them. And as part of it, they are reminded that our MP offices are there to help. But the government must do more to ensure that issues such as rural broadband connectivity are addressed, so our constituents across all of this Great Britain, United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, have the opportunity to be digitally inclusive. Thank you.
Robin Walker.
Thank you, Ms Harris, and congratulate the Honourable Gentleman for securing this debate. Digital exclusion is a really important issue, and like other members, I've been contacted by lots of constituents as part of the Age UK campaign on this, and it is of course true that the older generation are particularly affected. But we should remember that young people can also be affected by digital exclusion. During the pandemic, we saw a big move towards digital education and online, and making sure that the right devices, the right broadband access was provided to young people was a key part of the challenge there. In areas where there are digital hotspots, those people wouldn't have been able to receive the support they need. Now, I have to say, my constituency, the situation has improved a great deal during the last 15 years. We've gone from having a number of areas which didn't have digital access to now having 5G pilots and universal high-speed access in the city of Worcester. But it is a city, and I recognise the challenge for more rural colleagues. I do just want to sound one note of caution, though, about the drive to go ever more digital. The Education Select Committee are currently carrying out an inquiry into the impact of screen time on young people, and there are serious concerns about the mental health of young people and the impact of too much screen time in that respect. We're often told that part of the challenge with telling young people to reduce their screen time is the modelling they see from adults when we're all walking around the whole time staring at our phones. And the youngest children see their parents spending a lot of time online and in front of devices. UNESCO has recently changed its advice from a big drive towards digital education worldwide, and particularly in developing countries, to sounding some warning notes on the risks of too heavy a focus on digital. So I think in this debate, we need to absolutely focus on eliminating digital exclusion and making sure that there is support for those, and there are offline services for those who need to access public services. But we also just need to think about what is the balance that adults as well as children need to see between their digital lives and real life.
Tim Farron.
Mrs Harris, thank you very much for calling me, and it's a pleasure to serve under your chairship, and indeed huge thanks to the Honourable Member for Ellesmere Port and Neston for securing this debate. I simply want to talk about rural connectivity. Digital exclusion for many of us in rural communities is simply about not being connected at all. And let me focus in particular on Project Gigabit, which is a good thing, and the government is to be commended for its rollout. However, it's important we don't think that one size fits all. Project Gigabit is very good. However, there will be hundreds of communities, even within scope in Cumbria, who will not be connected as a result of all this. And there's no sign so far of the government having a plan to connect those houses, those communities, often hill farms and isolated properties that will not be connected, even though they're in scope. But I'm also very concerned about those properties and businesses, those communities who are in what's referred to as deferred scope when it comes to gigabit. I'm going to mention a bunch of places. Parts of Sedbergh, Caber, Merton, Longmartin, Winton, Warcop, Ormside, Hilton, Hartley and Bleetarn, all of them are places that if the government was to restore the broadband voucher scheme to those few parishes, we would be able to connect every single one of those properties within those parishes to gigabit connectivity, up, down and down, upload and download speed with our work through Barn, Broadband for Rural North, who would be able to take up the slack. And I want to encourage the Minister just to intervene in those specific communities to restore the voucher scheme so those places will not be excluded. And my final word is simply about digital voice that others have mentioned so far. During Storm Arwen, we saw places, communities like Coniston, Torver, Fluteborough, Allithwaite, Backbarrow, Haverthwaite, completely disconnected from all kinds of communication, simply because when the electricity goes down, so does your phone if you've lost the copper wire. It seems wrong that digital voice has been rolled out without thinking about the isolation and the lack of communication available as fallback for communities such as ours in the Lakes. Thank you.
SNP spokesperson Kirsty Blackman.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you for your work chairing this meeting. Congratulations to the member for Ellesmere Port for bringing forward such a popular and important debate on this. I actually want to focus my comments around the skills required for accessing digital. The access issues have been raised, and I think it is incredibly important. I don't want to take away from that, but specifically around the issues that there are with skills. By 2030, 5 million of workers will be acutely underskilled in basic digital skills. That is a significant number. That has got to be a massive concern for the government. It's got to be considered the skills that people require in order to access this. As was mentioned, there is a generational issue. Younger people are better at accessing these things. However, that's not across the board. There's an intersectionality of issues. You're less likely to be able to have the digital skills if you're more vulnerable, if you're older, if you're in poverty, if you don't have the capacity to access these things, if you don't have the time to access them. And given the cost of living crisis, we're increasingly seeing, or I'm increasingly seeing, numbers of constituents working multiple jobs who just don't have the time to work on their digital skills because they are too busy trying to make ends meet. This is a really big concern for me. COVID was mentioned and the rollout of accessing things online. During the course of COVID, the Scottish Government provided 72,000 devices and 14,000 internet connections to individuals who were at risk of being excluded, children and families that were at risk of being digitally excluded. That has massively increased. The number of devices is up to 280,000 at 2022, so we're increasing that as we go, in order to ensure that young people are not digitally excluded, are able to, when they're at home, are able to spend time typing up documents in Microsoft Word or Google Sheets or whatever it is that the school prefers them to use, because it's so important that those digital skills are available for people and that workforce of the future has got those digital skills. Yeah.
Robin Walker.
I just want to say, I recognise the good work the Scottish Government and indeed the English Government, the UK Government did on in terms of getting devices out to people. One of the points, though, that was highlighted to us by UNESCO, among others, is the cost of devices having gone out to people. They need to be maintained. Their security needs to be upgraded. And one of the things we really need to think about very carefully in all of our government budgets as we go forward is how we ensure that there is the ongoing investment in the digital technologies that are needed, both for the people receiving them and distributing them.
I do agree, and also that continual access to the internet, for example. So in terms of universal credit, there's a universal credit social tariff available for people, and every time that I meet with my local job centre, I make clear how important it is that they are stressing that this social tariff is available for people, and that they are making that clear so that people can access that reduced cost internet access. I think it's important that we've got it, and I think it's important that people know that it exists so that they can take it up. Within my constituency, locally, I was speaking to Virgin Money, who provide access to internet services. There's also an organisation called Silver Surfers, who provide older people with access to the services and the advice that they need in order to access the internet. Now, we've talked about and we've heard a bit about some of the negatives of the internet and some of the positives of online life. It is important to be able to access services online. It's important, particularly if you're in rural communities and you're a long way away from those services. It's important for loneliness to be able to access communities online. I'm just going to finish, I'm really sorry. It's really important that people can access these things. It's important to be able to access like-minded individuals. When my son had Kawasaki disease, it is something that hardly anybody has ever heard of. Yet I was able to access other parents whose children had been through the same thing to find out how this disease might progress and how things might change in that regard. So it is really important. And just lastly, in terms of disenfranchisement, if you try to get a voter authority certificate, the main way in which you can do that is online. It is possible to do it by post, but access to those voter authority certificates in order to prove your identity, which is something that UK government's put in place, is mainly online. So people who are disenfranchised and unable to access these services are even more disenfranchised because of the fact that this service is mainly online. I would encourage the government, when it comes to particularly things like voter authority certificates, they make sure that they are as available as possible for people so that they can get those, not just online.
Minister Chris Evans.
Thank you, Mrs Harris. And at this moment, I would usually go through and thank everybody for speaking, but obviously with time, I'll have to hurry up. And far be it from me to suggest anything to the House, and I hope I'm out of order, Mrs Harris, by suggesting that maybe some backbench MP would like to make an application to the backbench committee, because I do believe this issue is of such importance it requires more than just an hour. Like many others, I congratulate the member for Ellesmere Port and Neston for securing what has been a very oversubscribed debate. Even though we've had a number of very fast speeches, we've had some very good contributions. Digital exclusion is real for so many people, whether as work, education or access to online services, from banking to benefit applications. Failing to take action here would be to say that those people are not worthy of those opportunities, as those who have skills, confidence and income to regularly get online. 7% of UK households do not have internet connection at home. This rises to 23% when we look at households with an annual income of under £10,400. Mrs Harris, in 1924, the challenge of lawmakers was to ensure that everyone could read and write. The challenge in 2024 is that everyone has the digital skills they need. Full participation in modern life, as we have heard, often requires a suitably fast internet connection, a reliable device and an evolving skill set. This does not mean that the digitisation of things should be stopped. We cannot be King Canute trying to hold back the river. It means we need to take necessary action to ensure that everyone is empowered to access what they need. It's also important to recognise that not everyone falls neatly into groups digitally excluded or online. The Lloyds Bank Digital Index uses the DFE's Essential Digital Skills Framework in order to establish how many people can do certain types of tasks. This can include communicating, such as email, buying goods and services, staying safe and avoiding scams, and using search engines to find information. They find various skill sets and knowledge gaps and a wide range of confidence levels. Moreover, digital skills and confidence are not always the reason someone is partially digitally excluded. Someone's broadband may not be strong enough, as we've heard in rural areas from many colleagues today, to fill out a form or to stream educational content. People with particular disabilities face many barriers to accessing visual or audio content that doesn't support screen reading or full captions. The range of challenges demands a range of solutions, centred around skills, affordability and accessibility, as well as, crucially, ensuring the individuals at the heart of this very process. This can, where appropriate, means ensuring availability of an in-person equivalent, such as a community banking hubs, where high street banking is no longer available. And it's something that has affected me deeply, and you personally as well, Mrs Harris, in South Wales constituencies like ours. It can mean financial support or skills offering. Public libraries in particular are brilliant and do essential work by providing computers and a helping hand to their communities. but they cannot help in all cases and need funding and support to meet demand. No amount of community-based upskilling can get suitable devices and quality broadband into the hands of young or elderly people at home. 1 in 5 children do not have consistent home access to a device suitable for completing schoolwork. The potential consequences for their learning and their futures, I think, are rather obvious. Practically every week I have a conversation about how good tech policy needs to be, nimble and up to date. And I find sometimes we speak in cliches, and sometimes it feels like we go to the doctor and we say we're sick, and the doctor turns around to us and says, yes, you are sick. Well, what are we going to do about it? The last government's digital inclusion strategy was published a whole decade ago, and we often talk how fast technology moves on. That is now ancient history, and something needs to be done. In less than half that time, people have been through a pandemic, a cost of living crisis, and countless technological developments that have all completely reshaped our relationship with the internet for work, school, leisure, our finances, and access to public services. We cannot have, as somebody once said, act in an analog manner in a digital world. It is vital that this digital exclusion is given as much importance, as I said at the beginning, as we give to literacy in schools over a century ago. Much has changed, but we are at a stage now where people are at a massive disadvantage, and we have to do something to change that. Thank you.
Minister Party.
Thank you, Madam Chairman Harris, and I thank you for your excellent chairmanship of this clearly important topic and debate that has been clearly oversubscribed. And I thank the Honourable Member for Ellesmere Port and Neston for securing this debate on digital exclusion. I'm grateful to him and other speakers for their insightful contributions to today's debate. I'm conscious of time, so I'll be limited in what the interventions I can take, but I'm going to try and address as many of the issues that have been raised already. We know that digital technologies offer extraordinary opportunities, and if we take full advantage of them, we can grow our economy, we can create new jobs, and we can improve lives for British people right across the country. But it can have other benefits too, connecting communities, reducing loneliness, and making public services easier and faster to access. And all of those points have been very well made today. Right now, though, too many people across the country cannot experience those benefits. Digitally excluded people are less likely to be in well-paying jobs, they have worse health outcomes, and overall lower quality of life. As a result, digital exclusion does not just create new inequalities, it exacerbates existing ones too, making it more and more difficult to fully participate in society. That is why, even as we look towards investing in the transformative technologies of tomorrow, from AI to quantum, this government remains resolutely committed to ensuring no one is left behind in today's digital age. Because if Britain is going to be a real science and tech superpower, then our superpower status has got to deliver tangible benefits for every British person. We are under no illusions that this is a difficult task, which requires work right across government to address the many complex barriers we face. That is why the 2022 digital strategy outlined work across government that will promote digital inclusion, from accelerating the rollout of gigabit broadband to delivering landmark legislation to make the UK the safest place in the world to be online. By doubling down on the 4 key principles that we set out 10 years ago in the digital inclusion strategy, access, skills, motivation and trust, we believe that we have the foundations in place to succeed. I'm now going to try and take each of these principles in turn. Access, first of all. We understand the vital importance of staying connected in the modern age. That is why we have prioritised access to fixed and mobile broadband, including Wi-Fi, affordable tariffs and access to suitable devices. To ensure everyone has the access they need, the government introduced the Broadband Universal Service obligation in 2020, which gives everyone the legal right to request a decent and affordable broadband connection of at least 10 megabits per second. To ensure the USO remains up to date, in October 2023, we launched a consultation to review the obligation and will be publishing a government response later this year. And in March 2021, we launched Project Gigabit, our £5 billion mission to deliver lightning-fast, reliable broadband to the hardest-to-reach parts of the UK, areas that would have otherwise been left out of commercial gigabit rollout plans without government subsidy. Last week, Madam Chair, we announced that 1 million premises across the UK have received a gigabit-capable connection, thanks to government investment. The majority of these premises are in hard-to-reach locations, where previously many people would have struggled to stream TV shows, access online services, or run small businesses. And I'm happy to report, as the Honourable Member for Ellesmere Port and Neston should already know, and I'm sure he does, that his constituency does benefit from excellent broadband connectivity. In his constituency, over 99% of premises can access a super-fast connection, while 93% can access a gigabit-capable connection. Absolutely.
I thank the Minister for giving way on that point, and I'm very envious of the Honourable Member for Ellesmere Port for having such high levels of connectivity. But would he agree with me that those of us that find ourselves in the Project Gigabit Type C contract, where we're now seeing that the voucher schemes have been turned off, we need that procurement system to be speeded up so that we can all get to at least 99%?
Minister Batty.
Well, I thank my honourable friend for raising that point, and I will come to some of the points that she raised. I'm certainly happy to have a conversation with her about what support that she needs for her communities. In addition to excellent coverage, we also know that we have competitive pricing in the UK. The cost of a gigabyte of data is 50p in the UK, and that is half the average price in the EU, which is £1.18. We've also worked closely with the telecoms industry to ensure the availability and the provision of low-cost, high-quality fixed and mobile social tariffs are available in the market. 27 operators now offer social tariffs across 99% of the UK to those on universal credit and some other means-tested benefits. We have seen social tariff take-up increase almost 160% since September 2022. And while this represents just 8% of the total eligible households, progress is being made, and we will continue to work with telecoms providers to increase awareness of this provision. We've also supported access to devices and Wi-Fi too. Around 2,900 public libraries in England provide a trusted network of accessible locations with free Wi-Fi funded by the Department for Culture, Media and Sport. The Department for Education have also delivered over 1.95 million laptops and tablets to schools, trusts, local authorities and further education providers for disadvantaged children and young people since 2020. This is part of a £520 million government investment to support access to remote education and online social care services. And to support those seeking work, our Job Centre Plus work coaches can provide support to eligible claimants who are not online with financial support to buy 6 months broadband connections. This is administered by the Department for Work and Pensions through the Flexible Support Fund. And I thank my right honourable friend for Suffolk Coastal, who did excellent work through the pandemic. I'm sure I must have written to her on behalf of my constituents during that time, which was very, very uncertain. And I'll certainly take her points and ideas away as we progress. I'm going to make some more progress, if that's okay. This package from free Wi-Fi, access to devices and affordable fixed and mobile tariffs for 99% of the UK supports access to the digital products and services that are needed for modern life. And now I'll turn to digital skills. As well as the right to access, we are working to ensure that everyone has the right skills to be able to navigate their personal and professional lives. This, on a personal note, is a particular passion of mine and something I wholeheartedly believe in. And I know the member for Derbyshire Dales mentioned this throughout, and as did other members. Digital skills are central to the jobs of today and the workforce of tomorrow. Ensuring that the workforce has the digital skills for the future will be crucial to meet the UK's ambition to be a global science and tech superpower. And we are supporting skills development at every level, or at every stage, or every age, every stage, as I like to say. The Department for Education supports adults with low digital skills through the Digital Entitlement, which fully funds adults to undertake essential digital skills qualifications based on the Essential Digital Skills Framework. Since the introduction of the Digital Entitlement in 2020, the Department has supported over 40,000 learners to study for a qualification in essential digital skills. We are working closely with the Department for Education, Industry and Academia through the Digital and Computing Skills Education Task Force, which was launched last summer to increase the number of students choosing digital and tech educational pathways into tech careers. To inspire the next generation of tech professionals, we've also launched 2 initiatives. The Cyber Explorers platform for 11 to 14-year-olds, which has reached almost 60,000 students, and the Cyber First Girls competition, which supported 12,500 girls between the ages of 12 to 13 in 2023 alone. The Department for Education also funds digital skills provisions through community learning, an important stepping stone for learners who are not ready for formal accredited learning or who would benefit from learning in a more informal way, particularly for post-19 disadvantaged learners. In June 2022, the government launched the Digital Skills Council in June 2022, and which I co-chair, bringing together government and industry to strengthen the digital workforce. Last year, the Digital Skills Council partnered with Future.now to fund the publication of the Digital Skills Roadmap. This lays out collective commitments to ensure that all working-age adults have basic digital capabilities. Finally, we're also working at supporting people to develop advanced skills in our priority technology areas. We've established the £30 million AI and Data Science Conversion Course programme to broaden the supply of AI talent in the UK. It funds universities to develop master's level or data science courses suitable for non-STEM students, and up to 2,600 scholarships for students from underrepresented backgrounds. And just last week, Madam Chair, we launched a pilot advertising campaign designed to generate awareness of the benefits of learning advanced digital skills and drive people towards a new website with details on government-funded digital skills boot camps. These boot camps are 16-week courses, fully funded, with a guaranteed job interview at the end. To support workers to understand and apply AI in their jobs, last year, in partnership with Innovate UK and the Alan Turing Institute, we published the very first version of a new guidance document which helps businesses identify what skills their non-technical workers need to be able to successfully use AI in the workplace. The secondary barriers of trust and motivation, which I also mentioned at the start, must also be tackled to have a true positive impact on digital inclusion, but these are harder to measure. We recognise that some people are hesitant to access online services because they fear they may become the victims of fraud or that it is an unsafe environment for their personal data. So we are taking a number of steps to improve safety and trustworthiness of the online space, including through the Online Safety Act 2023. The Act will ensure that technology companies take more responsibility for the safety of their users, particularly children, online. It is a major step in protecting UK citizens from the scourge of online scams. The motivation barrier requires influencing decision-making and motivation at the individual level. This challenge is difficult to overcome and is best addressed through ensuring that access, skills and trust are in place, which is why those remain our focus. This is why we have supported work through libraries, charities and communities, including the Digital Lifeline Fund, and why we continue to fund free public Wi-Fi in libraries across the UK. There are many community-based initiatives at the local level, including work through libraries, as I mentioned, and from the third sector, such as the National Digital Inclusion Network, run by the Good Things Foundation, which is a vital resource to many working in this space. The excellent work from the Good Things Foundation, Age UK and others plays an important role in providing support with technology and the internet. These charities supplement government engagement by offering guides, training courses and volunteers to help people make the most of the internet. I will now address some of the issues raised around financial services. The government recognises that digital payments are playing an increasingly important role for businesses and individuals, with many making payments faster, easier and cheaper. But the government also believes that all customers, wherever they live, should have appropriate access to banking and cash services. It is imperative that banks and building societies recognise the needs of all their customers, including those who still need to use in-person services. The government legislated through the Financial Services and Markets Act 2023 to protect access to cash for individuals and businesses. This establishes the FCA as a lead regulator and provides with it responsibility and powers to ensure reasonable provision of cash withdrawal and deposit services is made, including free services for individuals. And the FCA recently consulted on proposals for its regulatory regime and expects to finalise its rules in the second half of this year. An alternative option to access everyday banking services can also be made by telephone banking and via the post office or banking hubs. The post office allows personal and business customers to carry out everyday banking services at 11,500 post office branches across the UK, and banking hubs are a shared initiative which enable customers of participating banks to access cash and banking services in shared facilities. The issue of local authorities was also raised, Madam Chair. Digital inclusion interventions are included in the UK Shared Prosperity Fund prospectus. This has allowed local authorities to allocate funding to digital inclusion interventions. This is because we know from key stakeholders that digital inclusion interventions work best when they are tailored to local needs and support is provided in community on an ongoing basis. I was surprised to learn of the issues raised by the member for Erewash, who obviously spoke about the digital disparity about non-digital access and the cost discrimination. And I did check, and I know that her Labour-led council are the ones who are in charge of this. And I hope they are listening to this and they realise and appreciate that this is a priority for government and it should be a priority for them too. The members, my honourable friends for North Devon and North Norfolk, raised some really important points around the switch over from PSTN. And I know there was a wonderful plug for the APPG that my honourable friend for North Devon runs, and I'm sure that's been heard loud and clear. The fact is, Madam Chair, the way that landlines work in the UK is changing. Communication providers like BT and Virgin Media are upgrading their old analogue landline network, and also known as the PSTN, the Public Switched Telephone Network, to a new digital technology which carries voice calls over an internet connection, also known as digital voice. This decision to switch off the analogue landline network was made by the telecoms industry, and the transition to digital voice networks is an industry-led process which is expected to conclude in 2025. However, the government was of course made aware of some very serious shortcomings in how the telecoms industry managed the PSTN migration. As a result, the Secretary of State, the Technology Secretary, convened a meeting in December 2023 with the UK's leading telecoms providers to discuss the ways to improve the protection of vulnerable households through the migration. In response, the major telecoms providers have now signed a charter committing to concrete measures to protect vulnerable households, particularly those using telecare alarms. This is a positive step which we hope will make sure that safety continues to be at the heart of the nationwide switchover. But I do want to turn to next steps, Madam Chair. Digital skills, of course, permeate through every aspect of policy, and I view this as a cross-government agenda to integrate digital inclusion as part of all policy decisions rather than a standalone issue. And the member, my honourable friend for St Ives, mentioned the cross-Whitehall ministerial group, and he mentioned the one for loneliness, which I also attended, and I can reassure him I attended that last week, and I'll be holding which I chair, the one on digital inclusion, and I will be holding some of the issues that have been raised there, and that all departments are considering the needs for people that are digitally excluded in their policy making. The group first met in September and discussed issues such as parking payments, website accessibility and device donation schemes. I am looking forward to hearing updates on these areas from my ministerial colleagues at our next meeting in 3 weeks' time. And I can tell you already that since our last discussion, Madam Chair, DFT, which leads on the national parking platform, expects that the full features of the MPP to be available from late 2024, making parking simpler and less stressful. The group also agreed to undertake a departmental mapping exercise and to review the viability of each department joining donation schemes. This work is an important step forward in our joint efforts to tackle digital inclusion, and I look forward to building on these conversations. In closing, I want to again thank the honourable member for raising such an important issue. I'm hopeful that we can work together, one that we are working hard on across government and have made credible steps to take. Credible steps to tackle the issue. As the digital transformation picks up the pace, we know there is more to do to ensure that no one is left behind in our digital age. But we're already rising to that challenge. Departments forming the cross-Whitehall ministerial group will work hand in hand across government, as well as with industry and our partners in the third sector, to deliver the benefits of a better digital future for communities all over the country.
Justin Martin, to wind up.
Thank you, Mrs Harris. Yes, so can I first of all thank all the members who have come and spoken today. I think as the opposition spokesperson indicated, there's clearly a lot of interest in this area, and I think a much longer debate would probably be in order, because I think we all didn't get enough time to fit in all the points that we wanted to, but I think it's probably just worth referring to the House of Lords Digital Committee report last year, which said that digital exclusion arises from a complex interplay of factors including age, socioeconomic status, disability, geography, educational attainment, literacy, language and housing circumstances. I think that probably covers most of the points that members have raised today. And I think the Minister in response talked a lot about what the government are doing in terms of access, in terms of skills, in terms of affordability. But I think that the central point that I think myself and a lot of members have been making was missed, which is actually some people, no matter how much the government invest in these areas, will not be able to access services online, and there needs to be an offline, in-person option. And there is a group of people, which I think we've all been talking about today, a significant group of people who are in that category at the moment, and they feel pretty excluded from fully participating in society. It affects their independence, it affects their finances, and it can actually affect their health. So what I would ask for is actually a clear statement of principle from government that we can all get behind, that actually all services, public or private, should be provided in person where there is the opportunity to do so, because actually whatever we do here, there will always be those people who, for whatever reason, and we've talked about them, need to have that in-person dialogue, and on that I will close.
The question is that this House has considered digital exclusion. As many of their opinions say aye, of the contrary no. I think the ayes have it. Order, order. The sit-in stands adjourned.
The proceeding has ended. 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 The proceeding